In August of 2016, Paul Manafort is the chairman of Donald Trump's campaign. In early August, Paul Manafort goes to a room on the penthouse of 666 Fifth Avenue, the Grand Havana. It's a private cigar club. He meets with a man who has come from outside the United States for this meeting, a guy named Konstantin Kilimnik, a Russian who had worked at Paul Manafort's political consulting business. One of the things that's interesting about this meeting is that the timing is just so significant. You know, in July, we had this sequence of really important events where people started to realize, oh goodness, Russia is doing something in this campaign.
This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove.
WikiLeaks was the big one, which was about 2 weeks before this meeting. WikiLeaks first published these thousands of pages of stolen Democratic Party emails, and people suspected Russia had stolen them pretty much right from the start. You had this press conference that people may remember with Donald Trump.
Russia, if you're listening.
Where instead of sort of condemning Putin and Russia, he kind of mockingly said, you know, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find Hillary Clinton's deleted emails. So there was all this attention on Russia, and then right after that, Paul Manafort is having this meeting. Kilimnik was a guy he was a Soviet Army veteran. He had trained at a language academy in Moscow that's known as a sort of recruiting ground for the Russian intelligence services. And he worked for Paul Manafort for 10 years. But just within the last year, the special counsel's office has told us something else really important about Kilimnik, which is that the FBI has assessed that he had ties to Russian intelligence throughout the campaign. So at this moment, when Paul Manafort and Konstantin Kilimnik were meeting in New York City, Mr. Kilimnik apparently was connected in some way to the Russian intelligence services. This August 2nd meeting is really key. It looks like they were talking about a peace plan for Ukraine, which was a top foreign policy goal for Russia, and potentially also talking about polling data that Paul Manafort gave to Kilimnik for some reason related to the US presidential campaign. Last week, there was a hearing in Paul Manafort's case. The special counsel has been arguing to a judge that even after he pled guilty and said he was going to cooperate, he continued to lie about certain things. He hasn't been charged with conspiring with the Russians to interfere with the campaign, but all this stuff about what he was doing with Kilimnik during the campaign speaks much more to the question of whether or not there's a chance that, in fact, he did help the Russians in their effort or not. That clearly is what the special counsel is exploring. Leading up to this meeting, Manafort and Kilimnik had this series of really interesting emails. We know that when Manafort first joins the campaign in the spring of 2016, he's kind of plotting with Kilimnik how he can use his job with the Trump campaign to make money. He asks Kilimnik to make sure that a Russian businessman who's very close to Putin, Oleg Deripaska, that his operation is seeing Manafort's good press. And he says to Kilimnik, how do we use this to get whole? He means financially whole. How do we use this job I've got and this positive press I'm getting with the Trump campaign to make money? There's a later email where Manafort tells Kilimnik to offer private briefings about the campaign to Deripaska. Deripaska says he never received any briefings. And then there's this really cryptic but interesting email that happens that's clearly what leads to this meeting, where Kilimnik writes to Manafort in late July and says, I just met today with the man who gave you the biggest jar of black caviar you ever got. I need to come and see you to talk about this. And Paul Manafort writes back, Tuesday is best, and Tuesday is August 2nd. I just can't emphasize enough how stunning this would have been if we had learned it during the campaign. The notion that Paul Manafort left Trump Tower to go meet with a guy who had ties to Russian intelligence and talk about the presidential campaign. I mean, their heads would have exploded if we had learned this in August 2016. And, you know, the passage of time doesn't really make it any less stunning.
Hi, I'm Elahe Azadi, pop culture writer at The Washington Post. Real journalism matters. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get our latest reporting and analysis.